Right, hi everyone. Welcome to part two of our where is it? Adding data access helper methods for entity. Okay, so in the last or in part one, we added some methods. Okay, we added find one by ID for account entity. We did find one by username, find one by account number, and create account. So for create account, we had a bit of issue in the while doing this, so let's check that. Yeah, so when we try to insert a record, we try to call this function, this last insert ID. Okay, and I looked into it and I saw why the issue happened, and kind of a bit of oversight from our side. So let's see why this didn't work. So this is dependent on a particular internal function called as val. Okay, but in summary, this would have an ID if we had an auto increment ID field. So let's say our ID for accounts was auto incremented integer, then this would have returned us that ID. But we aren't relying on the database to or the server to actually generate this ID. We actually providing it ourselves. So we shouldn't even need this function. We have the ID here. Okay, so we could just take that and look up the account by ID. So we could even replace this call with ID and pass in our ID here, and that should be fine. Okay, so that solves this particular thing. So use it if you have an auto increment field, so it just gets you the ID that was generated, and then you can use that to look up that record. Yeah, so that's about that. So I could safely remove this code. Right, so we have update existing account. So this is useful if we want to update um, the account entity. Okay, so let's say our balance was updated, we could use this to do that. All right, so let's see what fields would we need to update. Okay, so last modified at, so we need to know last time the record was modified, so this will need to be updated. Pin hash can be updated later, so this will be updated too. Created at only always stores the date time it was created, so we won't be updating that. So last modify that. Pin hash, account number won't change throughout the lifetime of the platform, so we'll skip that. Balance can change, so if there's a transaction that reduces or increases balance, this will need to change. I'm not sure we have a feature to modify the full name. Let's see. Okay, we don't have that. We only have pin and password. So yeah, so password, yes. Right. So let's do our update function. So how should we do it? Should we pass the values we want to update, or should we pass the account entity itself? Okay. So I think we'll go with the approach of passing the account entity, since it will have the values we need to update at any time. Okay, or we could pass but the only issue is that, okay, so if we pass the account entity itself, we need to make sure that there is an ID. Now ID is the only thing that would need to be updated. Okay, the ID, sorry, I think my thoughts are getting scrambled. Hold on. Yeah, so the ID is necessary for any update operation, but the rest are optional, which means there are times we could update one and not update the other. Let's say, for example, we need to update the balance. Okay, we would update the balance but not the pin hash. Yeah, of course, this needs to be modified every time. So we could create methods to handle those particular updates. Okay, or we could pass the account entity itself. Okay, and look up how do I put it, look up the account by its ID, and then look at the data that was provided. Anyone that it wasn't provided would use the existing value, but if it was provided, would use the provided value. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so the times need to update the password, times we need to update balance, times we need to update the pin hash. Okay, so these are the three things that we need update, right? Alright, so let's do that. So let's say for update we would pass, this might not be the best approach, but let's go with that for now. Or we could even say the entity should update itself. Maybe have we modify the values and then modify the values and then call the update within the object itself so that it updates to the database. But for now, let's just go with this approach. So update, and we'll pass ID, which is very important. So for every update we need to know what record we're updating, and then we could provide the possible values we will be updating. So in this case, we could update password hash. So let's add that password hash. This would be a nullable string. It could be null. We'll pass balance, which would be a nullable float. Balance, and then to be null by default, and we'll say pin hash, yeah, which would be a nullable string, and to be null by default, and we're going to return nullable and an account entity or no. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we will check to see if an entity with this ID exists. We already have a find one by ID method, so we'll just use that. So we'll say account equals self find one by ID. We'll pass in the ID. So if account is equal to null, and we don't need to proceed, so we could echo let's see, let's say update failed, account with ID was not found. Alright, then we could just return no. Right. So if it's found, then we'll do our update operation. So let's prepare our query. So say query equals update accounts set, so we'll set password hash equals password hash balance equals balance, and pin hash, pin hash equals whatever the pin hash is. And we also don't forget our where condition, because if we skip that, it will update everything in our DB where ID is ID. Yeah. Alright, so with that we'll get a PDO instance. So we'll say database helper get PDO instance. Then we'll say statement equals to PDO prepare, pass our query, and then we'll bind parameters. So we'll say bind param. Let's see. Now this, let's bind this, let's update these variables with values if none is provided. Right, so let's prepare them. So let's say password hash equals account get password. Okay, so equals whatever is the password hash if it exists, but if it doesn't exist, then we would take whatever value is in password hash from the DB. So we'll do that for balance. Whatever is in balance, if there is nothing in balance, then we'll get the balance from the DB. And pin hash, so say pin hash. There's nothing in pin hash, then we'll use whatever is in the DB. Right. So we'll do let's do ID first. ID. Let's do statement bind param password hash statement bind param. Let's do balance, and for the last one let's do pin hash, whatever is in pin hash. Right, so once that's done, we call execute, and then to confirm the update was successful, we could check the affected rows. Okay, could do that. I think rows affected, I'm not sure if that's rows affected. Alright, so we could say if I think statement I think was affected, right? Was affected is greater than 0, that means the statement was successful. So we'll just update our account with the latest data from the database. So we'll say find one by ID, passing the ID, and then we return accounts. And if it's not, then we'll echo the update failed. due to unknown error. Well, this, if there's an error, we would actually have an exception. Okay, we'll fix that. So we'll just return no, right? So let's try to see if this works. Alright, so we should have a record here. Right, so let's check that. Only violations. So okay, I'm not trying to insert. So let's try to find an account by username. Yeah. So let's do that. So account entity, find one by username, pass that username here, comment this out, let's check. So we have a record, no error so far. So want to update, let's say balance, want to update balance, right? So how do we do that? We will say account equals, maybe we should comment this one, but let's leave it there. Yeah, let's print the values. I want to only print if it's no. Okay, let's leave it there. So let's say account entity update, passing our ID. So say account get ID. So what do we want to update? So we want to update the balance. So say no for the first one, because the first one is password hash, second one is balance, third is pin hash. So let's do 90,000. My money only gets bigger. So let's do account after the update to make sure it works. Alright, so okay, so we got this, but we got a undefined property was affected. Let's see, was affected. Is this on the PDO object or on the statement object? Let's see. Okay, doesn't work, but let's see, it actually did update, right? Yeah, you can see our balance is 9,000. Let's look at the last. So before we executed, it was 50,000, but after we did that, okay, it couldn't print because of this error was affected. Is it was affected or affected rules? I think, and this should be on the statement object. Let's try again. Ouch. Okay, let me just check. Let's see. Aha, row counts. Yes, so let's check row counts, and it seems to be a method. Row counts, let's try it again. Nice, so this time it worked. Okay, you know why we're receiving this? Because we have an instance of PDO when next we do it. Okay, let's try updating something else. So let's see null, and let's say for pin hash, let's use this, right? Okay, so before the update, pin hash was null. After the update, we now have a value in pin hash. Note, balance is still 90,000. That's whatever we have in the database. Now, this might not be nice. What if we could mistake the password hash for the pin hash? And if we go with this approach, we need to know the positioning of each parameter, so as we don't make mistakes. But in PHP, we have name parameters, so you could specify where you want your data to be passed, or parameter where you want your data to be passed into, by specifying the name of the para. So you could say pin hash, I believe, and then that should be enough. Okay, so with this we can target pin hash specifically. So if we want to update the password, we could just say password, and let's say want to do that. Okay, so you can see the password has been updated, pin remains what was there before. So this makes it much nicer, right? So that's for the update. So let's do for so we need to do for transaction entity helper, find one, list by account ID, and create transaction. So let's quickly do that. Okay, so transaction entity. So let's start with finding one by ID. So make it static function find one by ID. We could actually steal what we have in account to save time. So let's do that. Maybe we could make it generic find one by function, but we'll talk about that maybe later. Okay, so we need an ID, but we need to return a transaction entity. And since we are in the method, we could just say self. Yeah, right. So forget this will be transactions. Everything else is fine. Okay, apart from the name of this variable, we want to call it transaction. Here we'll be naming it transaction and self, which will make the copy and paste easier. And we should call this transaction. Yeah, so that's that. Then we need a list function, a list method that would get all transactions by account ID. So that will be where beneficiary account ID is equals to the account ID, or sender account ID is equals to the account ID that we would be passing in. So let's do that. Right. So let's say public static function list by account ID. Then want this to be in descending order. Yeah, so what we can do is we'll say string account ID, and maybe we could say order, which would be descending by default. Okay, so here we want to return an array because we're returning more than one. So we'll say query. So how that query look like? So say query. So when getting a list account by ID. Let's see. So I'm putting this so that we could have a way to optionally sort what the order is. But I don't want user to pass any value other than this, other than descending or ascending. So maybe we could put let's say sort boolean let's say descending sort as descending, right? We'll make this true by default. Okay, so for this so let's get sort would be sort as descending. If sort as descending is true, then this would be descending, else this would be ascending. Okay, so a query would be select all from transactions where sender account ID equals account ID, that will be our placeholder, or beneficiary account ID equals account ID. Okay, then we'll do a order by created at when it was created, and then we'll pass the sort order, so say sort. Right, get a PDO instance, PDO database helper, get PDO instance, right? Then we have a statement, so we'll say statement PDO prepare, pass our query, followed by some options. So you've noticed we've been passing the same set of options, so I think we might find a way to set default options. So forward only. Right, then we'll bind our parameters. So say bind param. We'll see we just need account ID. Okay, let's say account ID. I think that's how I'll call it here. Account ID followed by account ID, which will be passing, and that's all. Then with this it just executes, right? So what do? Create a list of, so we'll call it transactions. We'll create an empty array. We'll say while row equals I don't call it, we've started calling row, so let's do statement fetch type will be PDO fetch sock. Okay, so for this, what do? So we store that transaction as a new entry in our array. So we'll see right, the method, so we could say self map to entity, and then we could pass our row. And once it's done, we just return our list of transactions. Right. Right. So let's test this. The last transaction we tested. Let's see. TX01. I'm not sure who owns this. I think maybe ACC001. So let's comment this out. Alright, so let's see. Transactions equals transaction entity list by account ID. So let's pass ACC001. And let's just do a var dump of the transactions. I think we have only one in our database at this time. Right, so let's clear. Right, boolean will be interpreted as class name. Do you mean? Oh yeah, it's bool. Just for this. Right, so we have undefined column. Okay, so this is called created at. Okay, so what do we have? So mine supplies one parameter, prepare statement requires two. So let's see where sender account ID is this. Oh yeah, this should be ID because we're referencing the same thing. Yeah. Right. Okay, so we got one record. Alright. I can't really test the descending and ascending other thing, but we'll be able to try it out, but it works. Right, so what's left for us? So we can consider this done. Can say this is done. This is done. Okay, so creating a transaction. Let's see. So creating a transaction. So we'll do something similar to what we did for AccountEntity. So we'll say create. We need to decide what we need to create a transaction. Return a transaction entity, or we could just say self since we're in the class. Alright, so what do we need to create a transaction? Let's see. We need the amount. ID will be generated automatically. We need the status, which could be any of these. Timestamp will be created by us. Then we need the beneficiary account ID and we need the sender account ID. So let's do that. Alright, let's see. We'll still what we have here, but I'd like us to type it out. Right? So but the idea is simple. We create a query, we get an instance, we populate generate any value we need to generate, which includes the ID and timestamp, and then we bind the right parameters, then we execute the statement, and then check to see if we have that record and return whatever we get from there. Alright. So let's do that. So start with our query. So say query equals insert into ID. We have amount, we have status, then we have beneficiary account name. So let's start with sender account ID, beneficiary account ID, created at, and last modified at. Right. Continue our query in a new line. So we can see values, and we specify values. So we could see ID, amount, status, sender account ID, beneficiary account ID, timestamp for created at, timestamp for last modified at. Right. So next, we get our PDO instance. So let's do that. So say PDO database helper get PDO instance. We generate a statement. So say statement equals PDO prepare, and pass our query. That's all. So generate other values. So say unique ID, generate a unique ID, generate a timestamp by getting an instance of the datetime immutable objects, or class rather, IMDHIS. Right, so we've gotten our timestamps, and then we can start binding. Or we could take this up here actually with the query, but doesn't matter. So say statements bind param, bind the ID, say statements bind param, let's go with amount. Oh yeah, we haven't passed these values, so let's pass them. Right, so float, amount, okay. What do we need? We need status, so it's going to be a string status. Then we need the sender account ID, which is going to be string, and we also need the beneficiary account ID. Yeah, I think that'll be all. So statement bind param, let's go with status, statement param, sender account ID should be the sender account ID. Okay, so statement bind param, beneficiary account ID should be the beneficiary account ID, which is here, and then our timestamp, which will be bind param, timestamp, so we called it here, and we'll pass that timestamp. Right. Once we do that, we can execute our statement. So say execute followed by trying to get our transaction record. So say self find one by ID, passing the ID which we generated earlier, and we return that value. Yes, so this will be transaction entity or no. Right, so I think this should work. So let's test that. So let's see our previous record. So we have a transaction between these two. So let's create a new transaction between these two, but this one as sender. So let's do transaction equals transaction entity, create personal amount. So let's say 15,000. Then what else? Status, let's say successful, let's say failed. Let's test our check constraints. So let's say failure, right? Then let's pass in ECC02 as the sender. Let's pass in ECC001 as the beneficiary. And let's do a var dump. Right, so let's comment this one briefly. Right, syntax error near this. So we have an issue with our SQL statements. So now insert within specify the table. So say transactions. Okay, so we have not null violation. We're passing a null value for beneficiary account ID. It shouldn't be. So let's see what we are passing a value definitely here. So let's check what went on. Sender account ID, okay, beneficiary account ID. That's what's supposed to be called. Right. Okay, great. So it fails. Okay, so we got this because we don't have a status called failure. We only have failed. So let's try failed. Alright, so this works, and as you can see we have that entry here. And then okay, yeah, so let's try testing our list. Okay, so as you can see we got our records, and in descending order. This was created, this is the most recent. You can see when it was created, you can see when the last record was created at this time. Okay, alright, so it works, and we could even try sorting in ascending order. So let's do, okay, yeah, so, and you could see that this includes records where the sender is either, sorry, the beneficiary is either this account, or the sender is this account. So it actually works. And let's try doing it in descending by passing, in ascending by passing false here. And now the most recent is below, and the oldest is above. Okay, so it works. Right, and we have this, but we'll really not be using this because we want transactions to be instant. Usually you don't update a transaction, it's like a log. Once an entry has been created, it cannot be modified. You have to create another transaction to effect a modification on the account. So if a transfer was failed and was later found to be successful, you would create a reversal, okay, yeah, for that account. So this will be a new transaction. Yeah. So we won't be needing this. So let's say discarded, right? Now this will be done. Right. So this concludes it for our part 2 of creating helper methods for our entity classes. So in the next one, we'll be creating helper methods for our CLI UI. Okay, see you in the next one.